Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video I am doing part 2 of this 3, maybe 4 part series titled the 150mm challenge. Now this is a Gothic style door knocker that I am forging. That is a Tom Latney inspired door knocker piece. So that means I'm using some elements that I have learned with Tom Latney and some of my own adaptations. That's why it's an inspired piece. It's not a knockoff or a direct copy of something that Tom Latney has made, and so therefore it's an inspired piece. Hopefully that's clear. So I've had a little questions on that before of what do you mean by inspired. So I've got my piece of 3/4 inch wide by 6 inch long material that we made, that I resized in a previous video, and I'm going to take and segregate out directly dead center of the piece a 20mm section or a 3/4 inch square section, roughly a cube of material. And I'm going to do that by using the guillotine tool. We don't want to go too aggressive with this. We just want some marks that we can follow for shoulder. We want it to be shouldered pretty well. That way we can forge on this here in just a minute and draw out these two ends. So there we go, we've got that shouldered. This center section is going to become a rosette area, and that'll be the part that sometimes you'll see these as like a knuckle piece. Sometimes you'll see them, again, you'll see them in all sorts of different things. There'll be a ring, some people will tie knots in it. It's basically what's going to strike the bolt that this will hammer up against. So now I'm going to take and draw out both the legs after I come back into the guillotine tool and work it away from the shoulders with just a square die inside the guillotine tool. So we're going to put our square dies in there, which they're just flat dies, and they're made to pull out the material a little bit better. So go ahead and heat this up just a bit more, and we'll see where we're at here in just a second. So for those of you who are just joining us and you're like, what in the world is this thing all about? I made a previous part of this series where I took and made the clevis portion, or the part that the door knocker is going to swing from. I made that, and it's fluted, and it looks really interesting, a nice little collared piece. I made that all out of this one piece of 3/4 inch square by 6 inch long bar stock, or 20mm square by 150mm long. Again, that is the 150mm challenge. You can read more about it in the description down below. So that's where I already did all that part. It was a long video, so beware of that. It is a long video, so pop some popcorn. Get the wife and kids, or the husband and kids, whatever your persuasion is, and settle in for a long video. Okay, so I've worked that joint out a little bit away from that center post. And now it's ready to just, basically, I'm going to get it good and hot again, and then we will hammer on it here. And we're just going to draw out each leg by itself individually. So I'll go ahead and get this tool out of the way for just a second down in my anvil stand. Now I'll draw this out. So at this point, we've resized material, we've taken bits and pieces off of it. I've also cut 2 parts. I decided to take and shorten this up by not showing you the decorative nuts. Basically, they're the same as making the rosette that I'm going to do here. It's just on these little end pieces, these little pieces I cubed off. Pretty simple to do. Not a whole lot to it, just to do it. Here we go. So, we're good and hot. We're going to draw that piece down. Nice and easy like. To roughly what's going to end up about like 3/8 square or 9 mil square. And that'll be as far as we'll take that end. We're going to go ahead and work evenly the other end now. Keeping everything squared up. Actually, it's probably more like 1/2 inch square or 12 mil square. Let me check it. Yep, it's 1/2 inch square. That's 12 mil square, if you will, material. And that's good. That's what we want to go to right now. We'll thin this down a little bit more because we're going to need quite a bit of length for this material. So set that on the anvil, switch tongs real quick. A pair of tongs that can grip this end of it. Back in the fire. And just so I don't have to take and work with the guillotine, put that back up. I'm just going to go ahead and just work it down at the edges of the anvil. That'll be a lot quicker for me than having to bring up an accessory tool. So this piece is good and hot now. And we're just going to draw it down like we did the other one. We're almost there. We're not quite as hot, so I'm going to heat that back up again and take it that extra little bit. Also, you might notice I'm not trying to go over the edge of my anvil to draw this out or over the horn of my anvil to draw this out, as I'm trying to be nice and controlled. As controlled as possible. There will be people who will argue that out, that you can be just as controlled at the edge or at the horn, and ultimately that's a farce. At the edge of the anvil, you are applying an immense amount of force on a single pinpoint area, and it's very hard to take and control the amount of force this far in the game, especially as the material gets smaller. It's really easy to overforge something. It's a little less aggressive. It's aggressive at the edge. It's less aggressive at the horn, and it's the least aggressive right here on the flat of the anvil. And you need to maintain your shoulders. And we're not trying to win no prizes here of speed. We're just trying to get this piece drawn to the correct size. And not go over. Accuracy is key here, not speed. This is a decorative element. You can take as many heats as you need to on this to get that correct. Not only is the stock size dimensionally important, but it is also critically important for the decorative elements that we're going to be creating in this piece. So just wailing away at this super fast and trying to fuller it out as fast as you can is not going to be appropriate for this product or project. You're going to end up regretting it in the long run that you were trying to choose speed over accuracy. All right, so this is 90 mil one side, 90 mil the other side. For us, that's 3 3/4 inches by roughly 3 3/4 inches both sides. So that's good. We're running 1/2 inch square or thick on both. We're nice and clean up at both edges here. So now we're good to go. So now the next step is we need to actually take and draw down a tenon. On each one of these ends, there's going to be a tenon that we're going to draw down that'll swing into our clevis. So we'll do that now. And then we'll add a little ornamental element to it. We'll add like a little band just beyond that, and then we'll draw down the material in between those 2 points to round. And you'll see it here in just a second. So let's get this good and hot. For drawing down this tenon, to save time, I'm going to go ahead and throw up again the guillotine tool. I'm going to get rid of the square dies, and I'm going to put back in the butcher dies, butchering away to establish our shoulder for our tenon. We're going to take a little less than a cube of material from the end. So since this is 1/2 inch square right now, or 12.5 mil square, what we're going to do is we're going to come in 1/4 inch from the end, or 6 mil from the end, and that's about where we're going to take and start setting down to draw out our tenon. Now this could be a fairly shallow tenon, so it's not going to be a real impressive tenon, but we're going to try to get, again, just nib off just a bit here. You want to keep track of your measurements and do whatever you do to one side to the other. You want to be real careful and make sure that you do whatever you did to the one side, you do it exactly to the other. Okay, so there's still enough heat in this. I'm going to take out my butcher dies and I'll put back in my square dies. And that will help me set down that area right there. Forge down. And now we're going to heat that back up so we can get that little nub done, that little tenon piece. After I get this side done, I'm doing the exact same process to the other side. So whatever you do to one leg of this, you want to do the other leg of the door knocker. Don't take one side too far, because then you'll forget the measurements you had on the previous leg. And that's not going to be good for business. So there you go. I've roughed out a tenon there. That's fine. It doesn't have to be super straight right now at this point, or perfect. We can file that perfectly round if we need to. The point of this forging is to save us some time on that. So there we go. Got that little tenon made. Pretty happy with the result. Make sure I square everything up. Now I'll go ahead and switch it over. I'll do the other side off camera, and then we'll come back and we'll add the little collared portions. So now that I've got this piece done on the other side, now I'm going to come back from the shoulder that I made for my tenon. I'm going to take and draw back just a little bit, and I'm going to do another 1/4 inch or 6 mil bite off of material there, if you will. With the guillotine tool of my dies, with the bevel pointed back towards me. Again, we're aiming for about 6 mil or 1/4 inch of material in this result. And we're just going to forge it down roughly, just like the tenon in thickness. So we're going to leave it just a little proud of the tenon's thickness. And just be accurate with your hammer blows, as accurate as you can be. And that's basically what we're looking for right there. So that's got me the proper amount. Now, as you can see, I've already drew out one leg. That's what we're going to do to this other leg now. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up one more time. Remaining amount of heat. I just want to take it down enough that won't be a bother. So let's go ahead and get this hot again. I'll remove the guillotine tool, and we will work right up into that corner, drawing a taper right up at that corner first, and then working it back up towards the other boss. So I'll go ahead and get this good and hot again. Take it up to full temp. You want to be careful with this because you've put in some time, so we definitely don't want to burn it up. Take your time with it at this stage. We want our hammer blows to be accurate, more so than quick. We want to stress accuracy here more than anything. Okay, so out we go, right at her shoulder. I'm going to start forging that down. Hopefully without clobbering that boss too much. And now I'm going to work that taper out longer. Until I get something that looks about right. So we're going to draw that down just a bit more. And I'm going to check the measurement on this here in just a second. No matter whether you're reading this in metric or you're reading this in standard, you want both legs to be the same length proportionally. That is the main key here. We want both legs to be proportionately the same length. So doesn't matter if you say it in metric, centimeters, inches, millimeters, thousandths of an inch. Doesn't really matter what terminology you use, just make both legs the same. I'll heat this back up. We're going to draw it down just a fuzz more now. And then we will move on to the center element, creating the rosette. Good and hot. Okay. I'm going to go back here to the tailstock of the anvil. Just because I've got the proper amount of reach there for what I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah, I say that looks pretty good there. So now by the time I turn that round, it should stretch out to the proper length. So my other side is, let's here, make sure I'm reading inches. Yep. So the other leg is 5 1/4 inches long. If I measure there, it's almost 5 1/4 inches long. By the time I round this up, both the legs will be exactly the same, and that's what we're looking for. So heat this up one more time, and we're going to go ahead and round it up. So when you're working between two shoulders, it's really nice to take and have a tapered horn if you can. If you don't have a tapered horn, like a square horn, You can always use something like a radius block, put in the anvil just like so, and work between the two radiuses. That's a perfectly acceptable method of doing things. You can come in right there at that radius block. It kind of works a lot the same like power hammer dies, if you will. You just want to aim at the radius block each time and work the piece over to it. We're going to take off those sharp 90-degree corners until we've got roughly an octagon-like shape. And then we'll go ahead and round this right on up. Again, we'll take one more heat on that, and we're just wanting to stretch this just enough towards the same size and nice and smooth as the other side. So I'm going to continue doing that off camera. Once it's fully smoothed up, I'll be right back with you and we can move on to the next portion. So now that I've got all that done, now we need to take and make our rosette. You guys have seen this tool before. I've made basically it's just a ball punch. I'm holding it with a pair of tongs here, but I'm going to take and pull out petals, pull out individual petals. We did this on the door bolt. If you haven't seen part 1 to this video series, go check that out. Again, it is a long video, so be advised, grab some snacks when you go watch that video. But then in the center, we are going to use one of these, an eyeball punch. I haven't decided which yet. I'm just going to play that one by sight once I get there. So just like in the door bolt video, I'm going to pull this piece out. We're going to quickly decide which end's going to be front. In this case of a door knocker here, this isn't really going to matter. And we're going to aim just in from the corner, and we're going to do this on all 4 corners if we can. And our goal here is to mush out just a little bit of material to take and make a rosette. You want to start in from the end, so this way your flower, your rosette will have some shape and some dimension. So we're starting in from the center, and then we're aiming out to the outside edge, so on and so forth, until we get the 4 lobes of our rosette done. So there we go. There's one heat there. So we'll set that down. We're going to heat this up again. Don't do a lot of straightening or correction with this. Once it's gotten down to that cool of a temperature, you definitely don't want to do that. Take your time, heat this piece back up, and then draw out the petals a little more if that's what you're trying to go for. Or in any event, you may want to take, let me squeeze that on there a little bit further up the tongs. This way they're not so far plopping off there. As I was saying, don't try to straighten this. You could develop a crack. You know, we have made some shoulders and some pinch points and some potential stress risers, and the last thing we want to do is go in there and bend on those and end up getting a crack. So be very careful with that when you're making your little rosette here. Take your time. Good work takes time. Good work takes time. So we're going to go ahead and get this good and hot. One more time here. While it's getting good and hot, if you've made it to this point in the video, man, you are a champion. So go ahead and comment down in the comment section, I am a champion. Because that is what you are. You guys are awesome. Those who have been staying around in these videos this long. So I'm going to go ahead and set out these just a little more. Again, it's going to give it the visual interest that I'm looking for. I still got enough heat here that I can straighten out these legs a little bit. I'm not going to get too fanatical about this because basically I'm going to have to come in and bend this anyhow, and so we're going to be changing this shape again later. So now I'll go ahead and brush this off. And now you all can see how decorative that looks in the center. Starting to shape up like a really nice door knocker. So heat this up one more time. And now we're done with the ball punch, so I can set that off to the side. Eventually I'm going to make eyeball punches in this type of tooling too, but I'm going to use my chasing tools that I have here. You really ought to have hot work tools and cold work tools. I've been using my cold work tools on hot work for a while now, and again, that's just that's not out of personal preference. It's just out of necessity because I don't have the tool and I have limited time during the day to just make myself tools. Usually I'm working on customers' projects or tutorials, so maybe we'll make some of those tools in future videos. So now I'm going to decide which one of these I want. I think I'm going to go for the lot larger size eyeball punch here. I think that's going to look best. And now we're just going to drive that straight down and home in the center of this piece. You want to rotate this around a little bit. Sometimes when you make an eyeball punch, they have a tendency to get all off to one side. So you just want to be careful of that, and that'll be good enough. All right. So we're going to give this a little straighten. I got a little bit of heat there. It's good enough. Not a ton of heat to work with, but just a little bit. And there you have it. So we have rosette, and we have our bosses on the end, our tenons to go into our piece. And now the final step here is to go ahead and clean up all this. Now you can leave this rough forged if you like, or just right off the anvil, or you can file it up and make it extra decorative and have really nice finish work done to it. It really is your choice. I suggest that you go ahead and pickle it at this point, or go ahead and sand this thing up nice and smooth, get out any rough hammer marks that you don't want hanging around before you take and bend it into a loop. But for the sake of YouTube, we will go ahead and go on to the next portion here. So if you've noticed, we have those two bosses on the end, but they're still square. I left them like that so this way while I was working on this piece, I wasn't marring them all up, because if you take a round piece and you take wolf jaw tongs and you squeeze on it, they leave little bite marks around the rims. So now we will go ahead and round those up. Now that we have established everything and there's less forging to be done, we're going to round up those little boss areas so they look a little bit better. Once that's done, the last thing will be to do is to go ahead and bend this up. To bend it up, I'm going to go ahead and use a set of bending forks that I've made a video tutorial on. I will be showing this in a video tutorial coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. But that's how we'll bend this piece up. All right, so all I'm doing is I'm putting that up on the diagonal, knocking the corners off, and rolling them off into one another, and that's good enough for our purposes. We're just trying to radius that off to where we got a nice round here. We're not using a ton of force. We're just trying to take and establish a nice round boss. Again, cleaning this up with a file and sandpaper and stuff like that is going to be a good ideal before you go to the bending process, because once it's bent around, it's all going to be a lot more difficult to get in there and clean these little individual pieces up. It's easier to do it while it's straight now. So now I'm going to let that cool. I'll do the other end, and I'll be back with you as soon as we're ready to bend this whole thing up. So I went ahead and cleaned this piece up off camera. I went ahead and just dressed out some of the hammer marks or some of the roughness that I didn't want, and trued up the tenons a little bit with the file and the grinder. And so now we're ready to take and go ahead and bend this up. using our little bending jig. The reason why I'm going to be using our little bending forks here is for the fact that if we're hammering on this, we can take and end up creating more hammer blows, and we just clean this up. So we don't want to do that. So it's really easy to come in here now and start bending this pretty accurately, if you will, with a bending fork. We can bend it exactly where we need it. No stress, no mess. We can get exactly the bend and the type of range that we're looking to get on this piece. I can bend it really tight right at the apex where it's going to end up eventually going into the latch itself, into the actual hasp. And again, just take it right on around like you see here. Now we're not going to fully bend this because we have to fit it to the hasp once I've done all the cleanup work. So that's going to be in video number 3 or part 3 of this video series. But as you can see with this bent piece, hopefully you can see, it's worth taking the time to clean this up. It's going to look so much smoother and so much more clean and professional when doing it that way. So now that this is done, we need to be careful of gripping onto this with tongs, so we need to let it cool and rest in order to take and come back and then bend this. We don't want any additional heat left in here because then we're going to distort what we've already done, or we're going to leave bite marks that we're going to have to dress out again. So I'll be right back with you after this side has cooled, and we will bend the other side. So this piece is nice and hot again. I let it cool for a bit, and now we're going to go ahead and bend this piece. Again, take your time with this. It's okay to take your time. And the ideal here is we want to take small little bites and bend at a time to get this to do what we want it to do. On this other side, I might end up having to take extra heats, and that's perfectly okay. We just want to take our time and get the bend to be accurate. That is the most important part. We want this side to look like the other side. So I'll just bend that some more. So let me heat that up a little bit closer back to the flower bloom itself, the rosette. And now you guys can see how quick and handy a little tool like this can be. It can be a very, very handy tool to have in your anvil, just a little bit of bending forks. Not everything in blacksmithing requires us to hit it with a hammer. And in fact, when you get into more professional work or fine detailed work, a lot of times you'll find yourself going to tools like this, bending forks, soft-faced mallets, things like that, whether they be rawhide or they be wooden mallets. You're going to be finding yourself taking advantage of things that don't necessarily strike the piece because you've put a lot of skill and time into finishing it finally before you've done some bending and things like that to build it up and to end up with a much nicer product after the end of the day is all said and done. So again, just taking these steps, none of these steps are particularly hard. It's just knowing what steps to take and when. So I'll try to get as much bend into that piece there as I can. Make it look about right. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to switch it over here. So this way I can go ahead and adjust whatever I'm missing here. Again, we want to leave this fairly open. We don't want to get too crazy with it because we need to take and fit it to our clevis. So that's where I'm going to end this video because we're going to have more of this work to do in the finish video, for actually finishing this piece up. That's all I'm going to do in this video. But again, it's just a simple thing. We're just trying to get this to bend ever so slightly and get it to go together closer and closer. And we'll have some more bending that we'll have to do on it near the flower blossom itself to get everything to match up. But hopefully you guys can see this is going to be a fairly attractive door knocker. So without further ado, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. Thank you for supporting the channel with all your watch time and taking time out of your busy schedules to watch today. As always, God bless you, and we will catch you in the next video, part 3.